remembered, and she slept early just to make the days pass faster. That morning, something inside her refused to stay silent. It was not anger or sadness, but a tired kind of longing, a need to feel present again. On impulse, she searched for a local gym, signed up online, and before she could change her mind, she was standing outside the building an hour later, heart racing as if she were about to step into a test she had not studied for. The gym doors opened with a soft hiss, letting out music and warm air, and Emily almost turned back, feeling too ordinary among people who looked confident and focused, but she forced herself forward, reminding herself that this was not about proving anything to anyone else. At the front desk, her voice shook slightly as she introduced herself, and when the staff member smiled and said a trainer would meet her shortly, she felt both relief and fear. That was when Daniel Brooks walked toward her, tall and strong but not intimidating, wearing a simple smile that felt real instead of practiced. He did not look her up and down or make her feel judged. Instead, he asked her name and thanked her for coming in, as if her presence mattered. As they walked through the gym, Daniel explained things clearly, keeping his words simple, noticing her nervous steps and slowing his pace without making it obvious. He asked about her goals, and Emily surprised herself by telling the truth, not about weight or looks, but about feeling lost, about wanting structure, about needing something that belonged only to her. Daniel listened carefully, nodding, never interrupting, and when she finished, he said something that stayed with her long after. That's a good reason to start. They began with small movements, nothing dramatic, just enough to make her aware of her body again, and as Emily followed his instructions, she realized how long it had been since someone had guided her without pressure or expectation. Daniel corrected her gently, encouraged her when she hesitated, and reminded her to breathe, and with each step, the fear that had followed her inside slowly loosened its grip. She noticed how calm he was, how focused, how his strength felt steady rather than showy, and for the first time in a long while, she felt safe trying something new. By the end of the session, her muscles were tired, but her mind felt clear, as if a window had opened somewhere inside her. Daniel handed her a simple plan, nothing overwhelming, and told her that showing up mattered more than perfection. As Emily left the gym, the morning light brighter now, she felt something she had not expected, a quiet sense of hope. She did not know why meeting this trainer felt different, or why that single hour felt more meaningful than weeks of routine, but as she walked to her car, she realized she had crossed a line she could not uncross. She had chosen herself, even in a small way, and deep down, she sensed that this decision would change more than her body, it would change the rhythm of her life, and she was both excited and afraid to find out how over the next few weeks, Emily's life began to shift in ways she hadn't expected, not because the workouts were extreme, but because Daniel's presence made the gym feel like more than a place to sweat. It became a place where she could breathe again, where her small victories were noticed and celebrated without judgment, and where the awkwardness she had carried since her divorce slowly softened. Daniel adjusted her routine with care, watching her movements closely, noticing when she strained or hesitated, and offering corrections that felt supportive instead of critical. He taught her that progress was measured in small increments, an extra rep, a heavier weight, a steady breath, and each success gave Emily a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in years. They began to talk during breaks, first lightly about movies or books, then more deeply about dreams they had once held and fears they still carried. Emily found herself sharing things she had kept buried, how lonely mornings felt in her quiet apartment, how she sometimes doubted her ability to start over, and how her confidence had slipped without her realizing it. Daniel, in return, shared stories from his own life, college football in Michigan, the injury that ended that path, the way training others had become his way of staying connected to purpose and strength. These conversations weren't flirtatious or heavy, but they carried a warmth that made Emily look forward to each session, to the way someone finally seemed to understand her effort and respect her pace. One evening, after a particularly challenging workout, Daniel noticed her hands trembling slightly as she set down the weights and simply asked, "Are you okay?" She hesitated, then admitted quietly, "I'm scared of starting again." He didn't answer immediately, instead letting her words hang in the quiet room, then finally said, "Starting again is the strongest thing you can do, even if it doesn't feel that way." That simple statement struck Emily deeply. It wasn't about the gym, the exercises, or her appearance, it was about life, about reclaiming herself after years of compromise and quiet resignation. Slowly, she began to see the impact of these sessions not just on her body, but on her mind. She woke up earlier, moved with more energy, and noticed small details in her surroundings she had ignored before. Her coworkers commented on her brighter mood and subtle confidence, and even her friends noticed she carried herself differently. Emily was becoming stronger, not just in muscle, but in spirit, and yet, the changes were gentle and steady, like a tide that reshapes the shore without announcing its arrival. With Daniel's quiet guidance, she pushed herself farther than she thought possible, learning that discomfort was not always a warning sign, but often a signal of growth. Each session ended with a small reflection, a reminder to hydrate, stretch, and acknowledge the effort she had put in. Emily began to appreciate her own body in a way she hadn't in years, its strength, its resilience, and the fact that it had carried her through heartbreak, loneliness, and self-doubt. She noticed her posture improving, her stamina increasing, and a calm focus settling into her mind that extended beyond the gym walls. Yet, amidst these changes, a subtle tension began to form, unspoken but palpable. Emily realized that she looked forward to seeing Daniel not just for the training, but for the presence he brought, the understanding he offered, and the quiet encouragement that made her feel seen. There was a warmth she couldn't ignore, a connection that went beyond trainer and client, but she didn't fully understand it, and the thought both excited and scared her. One evening, after a long session filled with laughter and shared stories, Daniel paused and asked if she wanted to stay and discuss her progress over a quick coffee in the gym lounge. Emily agreed, and as they sat together, sipping tea and watching the sunset through the large windows, she felt a shift inside her. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider that someone might care about her well-being in a way that wasn't transactional or superficial. Daniel spoke gently about patience, consistency, and believing in oneself, and Emily absorbed each word, feeling the truth in them resonate deeply. She realized that she was learning not just about fitness, but about trust, patience, and vulnerability, things she hadn't explored since her divorce. That night, as she drove home with her muscles sore but her heart light, Emily felt a rare combination of exhaustion and exhilaration, as if every small lift, every measured step, and every quiet conversation was building not just her body, but her confidence, her hope, and the faint stirrings of something more profound. She didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in years, she felt capable of embracing the unknown, trusting in herself, and opening her heart to the possibility that life could be both challenging and deeply rewarding. Each visit to the gym became a chapter in a story she was writing for herself, a story of strength, self-discovery, and quiet connection, and with Daniel's steady guidance, she felt the edges of her past fears soften, making space for hope, anticipation, and a slow, inevitable transformation that reached far beyond the walls of the gym. As the months passed, Emily's visits to the gym became the most important part of her week, not just because her body was growing stronger, but because her mind and heart were waking up to things she had long ignored. She noticed how she held herself differently, how her confidence quietly radiated in small gestures, and how the presence of Daniel, calm and steady, had become a source of comfort and inspiration she couldn't quite name. Each session challenged her physically, but it was the conversations that began to linger in her thoughts, the way Daniel spoke about resilience, about recovering from setbacks, about the importance of trust and patience, and Emily realized that she was learning more than fitness. She started to recognize patterns in her own behavior, moments where she doubted herself unnecessarily, and slowly she began to confront fears she had buried since her divorce. The gym had become a mirror, reflecting not just her physical growth, but the emotional changes that came with pushing boundaries and embracing vulnerability. Emily found herself thinking about Daniel outside the gym, his stories of past struggles, his quiet encouragement, and the way he celebrated small achievements without ever rushing her. There was an unspoken connection forming, subtle but undeniable, and she could feel it in the way her heart raced slightly when he entered the room or how a simple smile from him could lift her mood for hours. She told herself repeatedly that it was just admiration, or gratitude, or the effect of finally feeling seen, but deep down, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. One rainy evening, she arrived late, drenched and tired from the drive, expecting a short, ordinary session, but Daniel suggested they end early to avoid overexertion, showing the careful attention he always paid to her well-being. Emily shook her head and insisted she needed the workout, a statement that surprised even her because it wasn't just about exercise, it was about proving to herself that she could commit, endure, and push through discomfort. As the session progressed, the tension between exhaustion and determination seemed to heighten the quiet intimacy of the space. They moved through sets with minimal words, but the silence was comfortable, punctuated by occasional advice or encouragement. After the final exercises, they sat on the gym bench near the window, rain tapping softly against the glass, and for a few minutes neither spoke. Then Daniel said carefully that he might have to move to Seattle for a new opportunity, a statement that hit Emily with unexpected force. She struggled to mask the sudden ache of disappointment, the thought of losing the person who had become her anchor and quiet inspiration. The silence that followed was thick, each of them aware of the unspoken feelings hovering just beneath the surface. Daniel finally looked at her and said something simple but heavy with meaning. He acknowledged her growth, praised her strength, and reminded her that whatever happened, she had proven her own resilience. Emily felt a mix of gratitude, longing, and uncertainty, a realization that her admiration and emotional attachment to him had grown into something far deeper than she had intended. As he stood to leave, she wanted to say everything, how much his guidance had mattered, how much she valued him, but words felt inadequate, and the fear of crossing boundaries kept her quiet. Walking to her car, Emily replayed every smile, every gentle correction, every conversation, understanding now that her feelings had quietly shifted from professional respect to something tender and personal, a blend of longing, attraction, and a desire for connection she had almost forgotten existed. That night, lying in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling of unfinished business, not just in her heart, but in the life she was building for herself. She realized that Daniel had become a mirror to her own courage, reflecting strength, patience, and care, and that the emotional bond forming between them was as transformative as the physical changes she could see in the mirror. Emily understood that this was uncharted territory for her, how to navigate feelings that had no clear boundaries, how to honor her own growth while managing the unexpected stirrings of attraction, and how to reconcile the comfort she felt with the fear of loss. She thought about all the sessions where she had pushed herself past limits she hadn't known she had, how his encouragement had been both gentle and firm, and how that balance had taught her to trust herself again. The emotional intensity of realizing that someone could see her, appreciate her, and care without judgment was overwhelming yet exhilarating, creating a tension between vulnerability and self-protection. Emily also recognized the bittersweet nature of attachment, how someone who had become central to her personal transformation could soon be absent, and how that possibility made every interaction feel more precious. The rain outside mirrored the uncertainty she felt inside, soft and persistent, a reminder that life was moving forward whether she felt ready or not. She reflected on how far she had come since her first hesitant steps into the gym, the fear, the awkwardness, the self-doubt, and now, each session felt like a dance between effort and emotional awakening. Emily's feelings grew in complexity, admiration intertwined with affection, respect with longing, and trust with quiet hope. She wondered if Daniel sensed the same shift, or if she was reading too much into gestures that were, after all, part of his professional demeanor. Yet, even with the questions, she felt a strong sense of clarity about herself. She was no longer passive, no longer waiting for life to happen to her. She was taking steps, small but meaningful, to reclaim joy, connection, and courage. That evening, after the gym lights dimmed and the space emptied, Emily left with a heart full of questions, a mind buzzing with thoughts, and a renewed determination to embrace whatever came next, knowing that her journey was no longer just about building physical strength. It was about understanding the depths of her own heart and the courage to face uncertainty while cherishing the people who inspired her to be her best self. After Daniel left for Seattle, Emily felt an emptiness she hadn't anticipated. The gym felt different without his steady presence, the quiet guidance that had made her feel capable, and the subtle warmth that had grown between them over months of shared effort. At first, she struggled, showing up alone felt harder, exercises seemed heavier, and the absence of his encouragement left a strange void. But she reminded herself of the lessons he had instilled. Progress comes from consistency, strength comes from persistence, and courage comes from choosing oneself even when it's uncomfortable. Slowly, Emily built a new routine, one that belonged entirely to her. She experimented with weights, tried new exercises, and tracked her progress, finding pride in her ability to continue without needing someone to push her. Each session became a reaffirmation of her own resilience, and though she missed Daniel, she carried the lessons of patience, encouragement, and trust in herself like tools she could always use. Friends and colleagues began noticing her renewed confidence, how she stood taller, smiled more, and spoke with clarity she hadn't had before. Months later, just as she had grown comfortable in her independence, a message appeared on her phone. Daniel was back in town for a workshop and wondered if she wanted to meet for coffee. Emily's heart raced, but not with fear. It was a mixture of excitement, anticipation, and a quiet confidence born from the growth she had achieved on her own. They met in a cozy cafe, where soft light and the aroma of coffee created an atmosphere of calm familiarity. Daniel hadn't changed much, though there was a subtle maturity in his demeanor, a quietness in his eyes that spoke of experience and reflection. They talked for hours, sharing updates about life, work, and personal growth, and Emily realized that the connection they had built over months at the gym had matured into something deeper: friendship, trust, and the beginnings of a genuine emotional bond. Daniel admitted that leaving had been difficult because it meant stepping away from something meaningful, but he also emphasized that he had needed the distance to grow as a person. Emily listened, and for the first time, she acknowledged that her feelings had evolved too, not dependency, but appreciation, respect, and a gentle attraction that was grounded in understanding and shared growth. The conversation flowed naturally, free from pressure, full of mutual acknowledgement that they had both changed in ways that mattered. Emily recognized that she no longer needed someone to define her strength or happiness. She had cultivated it herself, but the presence of Daniel now felt like a choice rather than a necessity, a partnership rather than a crutch. They laughed, reminisced about small moments in the gym, and talked about future possibilities without promises or expectations, creating a space where honesty and care were the foundations. Walking home later, Emily felt a lightness she hadn't felt in years, a combination of empowerment, hope, and quiet excitement. The realization settled in that joining the gym had been the catalyst, not just for physical transformation, but for emotional awakening, self-discovery, and the courage to embrace connection without fear. She understood that life was about growth in multiple dimensions: body, mind, and heart, and that the people who enter our lives, temporary or permanent, can inspire us to rise to our potential. Emily felt gratitude for the journey, for Daniel's guidance, and for the resilience she had cultivated within herself. She knew that whatever came next, she had learned to trust her instincts, honor her feelings, and move forward with intention. That day, sipping the last of her coffee, she smiled at the knowledge that she had changed profoundly. She was stronger, braver, and more open to the possibilities of life and love. And though Daniel was part of her past, present, and possibly future, Emily realized that the most important relationship she had built was the one with herself, a bond grounded in courage, self-respect, and the willingness to embrace life fully, no matter where it led. The experience had shown her that true transformation isn't just about building muscles or routines, it's about nurturing the self, recognizing value in personal growth, and allowing others to complement, not define, that growth. Emily left the cafe that evening with a renewed sense of purpose, a calm confidence in her own abilities, and a quiet hope that the story of her life could now unfold with strength, grace, and the freedom to welcome connection on her own terms. She walked under the fading sunset, feeling the steady rhythm of her steps echoing the rhythm she had cultivated inside, strong, independent, and open-hearted, ready to face the next chapter, whatever it might hold, with courage and clarity.